What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Clawed Out Games. I hope everyone's doing great today. Today I'd like to go over a deck tech over Titus, YUNA'S Guardian, who is from the Final Fantasy set. So before we get into that, I do please ask you to like and subscribe on the channel. I appreciate you all taking your time to watch a silly little video about some cardboard. So I appreciate you guys. So let's get right into it. Titus, YUNA'S Guardian, is a Bant commander, so green, white, and blue. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may move a counter from target creature you control onto a second target creature you control. And he has Cheer. Whenever one or more creatures you control with counters on them deal combat damage to a player, you may draw a card and proliferate. Do this only once a turn. So why I was so interested in Titus as a commander was because I had an Atraxa deck years ago, and that was like my first, deck I actually invested time and put some money into. And Titus here reminds me a lot of Atraxa with the proliferation and the card draw in the command zone, which is a bonus. So he's not as like super oppressive as Atraxa. Atraxa will not get you any friends at the command table. She's just very, very, very good. So, and I played with Titus a few times, and he's really fun to play. He is good, but he is not as oppressive and crazy as Atraxa. So we really like the Titus deck. And if you're a big Final Fantasy fan, I'm sorry. I only have 2 cards, I believe, from Final Fantasy set in here. I actually had built this before the Final Fantasy set had been released. So I just had a ton of cards, like I said, from the Atraxa deck and other things like that that I collected over the years that I threw together for this deck. So I got my piles here. Let's go over them one at a time. Let's go over the card advantage. I really like this deck. There's a lot of card advantage in this deck, counting the one in the command zone. So let's start with Court of Garenberg. ETBs, you become the Monarch. That's where the card advantage comes from. It's weird calling Monarch card advantage, but it will at least, replace itself with a card draw at your inset. At the beginning of your upkeep, distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among up to 2 target creatures. Then, if you're the Monarch, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature. That guy can get really out of hand. Or in Frostfang, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, and attacking creatures you control have Death Touch, so no one's going to want to block your creatures. It's a classic green card draw. We have Kutzel. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, and whenever one or more creatures you control, each with power greater than his base power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So +1/+1 counters, obviously, it makes the power and toughness greater than the base power and toughness. So you could theoretically deal or draw 3 cards a turn from this guy. That card is sweet. You got Armorcraft Judge. ETBs, draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. For 4 mana, it's pretty good. Dusk Legion Duelist, 2/2 for Vigilance for 2 mana. Whenever one or more counters are put on Dusk Legion Duelist, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. We got Fad the Mage, which is one of my favorite cards in this strategy. It's got Evolve, which isn't super important, but it will put a counter on itself when a bigger creature enters, which is relevant. And whenever a counter is put on Fad the Mage, you draw a card. That's not once a turn. That's just constant. It's very, very, very good. This card can get out of control. It's one of my pet cards. I love that guy. And then we got Leonor, Autumn Sovereign. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a counter on up to 1 target creature. Then if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, draw a card. We got Tamio. Choose up to 2 target creatures until your next turn. Whenever either of those creatures deal combat damage, you draw a card. And you can kind of do a pseudo removal control-y by tapping permanents. And if you ever get this to ultimate, this card gets out of hand. You draw 3 cards and you essentially get an Omniscience. And we do have, spoiler alert, of Vorinclex in there. So if you have Vorinclex out, you just ultimate her right when she comes out. Beast Whisper, another classic green. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Hydroid Krasis, it's an X spell, Simic X, and when it enters, it gets X counters, and you draw half X life, or draw half X cards and gain half X life. Tribute to the World Tree, another one of my favorite cards. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under control, draw a card if its power is 3 or greater. Otherwise, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. You got Inspiring Call. Draw a card for each creature you control with a counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. You got Azuri for 4 mana. He is a 3/3 Phyrexian Elf Warrior. When he enters the battlefield, you may pay 3. If you do, proliferate twice. And he says, whenever you proliferate, draw a card. So it's doubling up on that card draw from the command zone. Falco, Spara Pact Weaver. Now, I actually had this guy as a commander when I was trying to pivot off of Atraxa. He's cool. He just wasn't as good in the command zone as I like. You really want to manipulate taking counters off with this guy. And there are some fun things you can do out there. That just wasn't what I was looking for. But it's a 3/3 Flying Trampler. When it ETBs with a shield counter, look at the top card of your library at any time. You can cast spells from the top by moving a counter from other creatures in addition to paying to their cost. So that's a pretty cool guy, but we'll see how he runs in a deck like this. So we have our removal, which is a little thin, but all the removal is very synergistic with counters, which I really like about this deck. We got Requisition Raid. I didn't ever pick this up when this card came out, but this card is sweet for this decks like this. Pay 1, it's got Spree. You can pay 1 3 separate times to destroy a target artifact or destroy a target enchantment, or put a counter on each creature target player controls. Really sweet card. You got Jamoka's Command, which is a really fun kind of removal protection piece that I've had for a while now. You can choose to prevent all damage target instant or sorcery spell would deal this turn, which is protection. Target player sacks an enchantment, which could be the removal, or put a counter on target creature, or a target creature you control fights target creature you don't control, so it's a fight spell as well. We got Bane of Progress, which is a beast of a card. For 6 mana, when the ETBs, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. This will be for your stuff too, but you're not gonna be playing it if you have a ton of artifacts and enchantments out. And he enters with a +1/+1 counter for each permanent destroy this way. We have Contagion Engine. ETBs put a counter, -1/-1 counter on each creature target player controls. So it could be kind of, I don't know, salty to play this on a certain player, but you're probably only going to play this against a player that is clearly ahead, so he won't be too mad, and the rest of the table won't be too mad. Plus, you pay 4 and proliferate twice. We got District Mascot. ETBs with a counter, and you can pay 2, remove 2 counters from District Mascot, and destroy target artifact. Hopeful Initiate, which is very similar. You pay 3, remove 2 counters from any creatures, and destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's better, but we got 2 of them in there. Contagion Clasp. So ETBs put a counter on 1 target creature, so it could remove it just from that. And you pay 4 and proliferate. We have Constable of the Realm, which is a card that I just found out about too, and I'm excited to play him in here. He is a 3/3 giant soldier for 5. Whenever 1 or more counters are put on Constable of the Realm, exile up to 1 other target non-land permanent until Constable of the Realm leaves the battlefield. So you can move a counter onto him from Titus and then proliferate once you hit, and that's 2 permanents you remove right there. It's pretty good. And then we have the other Final Fantasy card is a 4-drop Auron Venerated Guardian. And if I'm butchering these names, I've never played Final Fantasy, so I apologize. But he's a 2/5 Vigilance. And whenever he attacks, put a counter on him. And when you do, exile target creature defending player controls with power less than Auron's power until he leaves the battlefield. So it's good removal. Let's go into the ramp here. Soul Ring, Birds, Everflowing Chalice. This one is pretty sweet in this deck because you can pay 2 and make it just a normal colorless mana rock, and then constantly proliferate things, and he will get exponentially bigger. So it's a pretty cool card in this deck. Nature's Lore, Kodama of the West Tree, also giving things trample, and whenever a modified creature, which is creatures with counters on them, deal combat damage, you go get a basic land. Pentad Prism. So it's Sunburst. You want to cast this for 2 different colors, and it'll enter with 2 counters on it. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool after you remove a counter. So you play this. You can use one of them to get Titus out, but once that happens, you really, really want to not use the second one because you just want to keep proliferating and proliferating and proliferating, putting more and more counters on it. You got Gyre Sage. It's got Evolve, and you can tap it and add green for each +1/+1 counter. So if you guys haven't noticed, outside of the like basic ramp spells, a lot of these are synergistic with counters, and they can exponentially get bigger and tap for a ton of mana. Incubation Druid, you can add 1 mana, or if there's a counter on it, you add 3 mana. Delighted Halfling, classic. Kami of the Whispered Hope. If one or more counters we put on a permanent control, that many plus one of those counters are put on that permanent instead. And you can tap it, add X mana of any one color where X is its power. So again, it can get tapped for huge. Astral Cornucopia is very similar to Everflowing Chalice. It just taps for colored mana, and it costs 3. And then you got Crystalline Crawler. I love this card. This card is sweet. Enters for a +1 with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. And you remove a counter and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So you can get crazy with this guy once it hits the battlefield. Let's go over things that put counters on your creatures. You got a Johnny, giving your creatures vigilance. You can uptick it to give 3 life or gain 3 life, and you can down tick it to put a counter on each creature you control and a lower to counter on each planeswalker. I think I only run 2 planeswalkers in this deck. You got Surok and Goreclaw. Other creatures you control have trample, and whenever another non-token creature ETBs in your control, put a counter on it, and it gains haste. Sweet card. Oh, I lied. I got 3 planeswalkers in here. You got another Johnny here. Really, what we have them in here for is that negate 2 ability where you put a counter on each creature you control. You got Renata. Each creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Same with Good Fortune Unicorn, does the same thing. Warden of the Grove, which is a really exciting new card from Tarkir. At the beginning of your end set, you put a counter on this guy, and then whenever another non-token creature you control enters, it endures X, where X is the number of counters on this guy. So you can either create an XX Spirit, or you can put X counters on the creature that entered, where X is the number of counters on him. Arwen, ETBs, put a counter on it equal to Argorin's toughness, so hopefully you beef her up, and then she'll beef up the rest of your battlefield. Lysel, it's just the hardened skills effect, but it does it for planeswalkers too, and for any counters, not just +1/+1. We got some big beefy boys here. We got Railway Brawler. Whenever another creature ETBs, put X counters on it, where X is its power, and you can do it with the plotting mechanic as well. We have Quilled Great Worm, Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player during your turn, put that many counters on it, and you can cast it for your graveyard later. Then we got Vorinclex. Good luck reading this guy. It's in Phyrexian, but he is a 6/6 for 6 with trample and haste, and he says if you would put counters on any of your permanents, you would get double counters, and if an opponent would try to put counters on anything, they get half of those counters rounded down. So if they're trying to only put 1 counter on it, it's actually 0 with Vorinclex. Pretty sweet card. Mikaeus, you can tap him, remove a counter, and put a counter on every other creature. Master Biomancer, it's another sweet card. It's just like Arwen, but it's his power instead of his toughness. We got Luminarch Aspirant, put a counter on target creature at the beginning of combat. We got Forgotten Ancient, super sweet card. My play group loves to see this guy entering. We love to see that. And then we have Loyal Guardian, which has Lieutenant, and Lieutenant says at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, put a counter on each creature you control. Sweet card. Let's go over into the fun, different counters, strategies in this deck. I want to get some more for this deck, so if you have any ideas for different counters that can be thrown around, let me know down in the comments. This is all about, counters other than +1/+1 counters. So we'll start off with Arwen, which is one of the sweetest looking cards that came out of the Lord of the Rings set, in my opinion. I just never could find a home for her, but she was made for this deck. She ETBs with an indestructible counter. And you can pay 1 to remove an indestructible counter from Arwen, and another target creature gains indestructible until end of turn. So it's kind of like protection. If someone tries to use a removal piece on someone, remove an indestructible counter and protect the other creature. And put a +1/+1 counter and a lifelink counter on that creature, and a +1/+1 counter and a lifelink counter on Arwen. So ideally, you would proliferate those indestructible counters, or have more than one indestructible counter on her, and before you start moving them around. You got Reluctant Role Model. So you want to get this guy tapped. So at the beginning of your second main phase, if he is tapped, put a flying, lifelink, or a +1/+1 counter on him. And when Reluctant Role Model or another creature you control dies, if it counters on it, put those counters on up to 1 target creature. You got Crystalline Giant. This one is weird to play. We usually have to come up with some funky system with dice, but at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose a kind of counter at random that Crystalline Giant doesn't have on it from among Flying, First Strike, Death Touch, Hexproof, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Trample, Vigilance, and a +1/+1. Put a counter of that kind on Crystalline Giant. He is a fun card, especially for this deck, because you can start throwing around weird random counters on different creatures. And then we got an all-star in this deck, Denry Klein, Editor-in-Chief. Whenever he enters the battlefield, you can put a choice of +1/+1, First Strike, or Vigilance counter on him. And whenever another non-token creature you control enters the battlefield, if he has any counters on him, put those same number and kind of counters on that creature. He's a sweet, 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 sweet card. Finally, let's go over a couple proliferation things I have in here. We have Metastatic Evangel. Okay, it's whenever another non-token creature ETBs in your control proliferate. I haven't been able to play this card yet, but I'm excited to play it. Dreamtide Whale, Vanishing 2. So this creature enters with 2 time counters on it, and at the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter from it. When the last one is removed, sacrifice it. Spoiler alert, he will never get those removed, because whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, proliferate. That includes you. And he's a 7/5 giant whale. This card is so sweet. I love this card. And then we have some finishers. These are ways to win the game. You have Herald of the Secret Streams. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them cannot be blocked. Super good. Absian Falconer. Creatures with +1/+1 counters on it has flying. And then Champion of Lambholt, classic win con for our play group at least. Creatures with power less than Champion of Lambholt's power can't block creatures you control. And whenever another creature ETBs in your control, put a counter on them. Another creature I would put in this category would be Kodama, because he gives modified creatures you control trample. So that would be another card that I would put in that category. So that's it for the deck. We have our land base, which we always have Balaged Recovery in our green decks. There's not really anything in particular that synergizes well with this. I believe I have Karn's Bastion in here that will allow you to proliferate for paying like 4 mana, I think it is. But anyway, guys, this is my Titus deck tech. Let me know what you guys think down below. I appreciate every single like, every single comment, and every single subscribe. So yeah, peace, guys.